If your blood runs orange and blue, this is the pod for you. You're listening to Orange and Blue Bloods, hosted by EJ Stewart and Tommy Beer. Let's get to it, New York.
But let's focus back on Julius Randle because he's been a hot topic because of his antics over the past few weeks. So before Monday's game, as Tommy mentioned, he did speak to the media for the first time since receiving a technical foul in 3 consecutive games that culminated in the Magic game, in which he got a tech and then had the mini blow up with Emmanuel quickly. When asked about his recent outbursts, Randle acknowledged there's a fine line between passion and stepping over the line, but rejected that it's a reflection that he is unable to be a leader for this team. He said, quote, "I don't think it has to do with that. Name a perfect leader, name a perfect human being," he said, unquote. Asked about the tense exchange with Emmanuel quickly on the court, Randle said, quote, "What happens within our team happens within our team, so I'm not going to speak on specifics on how we handle things. But at the end of the day, we're a team, we're good, and we're just focused on winning." So he would not elaborate as to whether or not there was an apology to Emmanuel quickly or if there was any kind of discipline or anything that was done. He said that gets kept in-house. So that was Randle talking about, the concerns about his behavior over the past few weeks. What I found interesting was quotes from Jeff Van Gundy, who spoke with the New York Post and said that he is concerned about Julius Randle's temperament as a leader for the Knicks heading into the postseason. Van Gundy said, quote, "When you're in the playoffs, every possession, there's obviously more meaning, more pressure. It's going to be more physical. So you're going to have to take more hits and bumps that are not called. And if you can't handle as a team or as an individual physical play or calls that don't go your way or bad runs in a game, then you're not going to have the mental fortitude to be able to endure and win playoff games and series. You need your best player to play their best when their best is needed. And the only way to do that is if you have mental strength." So very pointed words there from Jeff Van Gundy. Also, what I found interesting in this interview he did with the New York Post, they asked him, is the onus on the coaching staff or Tibbs to kind of figure it out? And he said that the onus is actually on Randle. He said, quote, "As far as what a coach can do, if this problem is to be corrected, it's going to be because Julius Randle wants it to be corrected. It can be punished by a coach or an organization, but it can only be corrected by the player." So I thought very interesting commentary from Jeff Van Gundy. There was a lot of commentary on the Julius Randle stuff that we've been seeing. It seems like fans have been split. There's the faction of fans that feel like what happened was not a big deal and that maybe people are being too hard on Julius given how he's played much of the season and how he's been, for the most part, a good soldier for the rest of the season. Others have talked about how what we've seen from him has been quite concerning. Are you convinced that Julius Randle is back on track given what you heard from him before the game on Monday?
So there's a lot to unpack there. First, let me maybe I'll go in reverse order. The fan commentary, a very reasonable take to say, listen, it doesn't matter. These guys are temperamental. IQ's a grown man. We've all been on teams before. Some guys are ornery and get angry in the heat of the moment, but then they'll go out for beers afterward or have a barbecue and everything's all good, and that's cool. The one thing when fans try to compare, they're posting clips of Patrick Ewing yelling at teammates or comparing him to Kobe Bryant and Draymond.
Insane.
Please don't put Randle in the same conversation. When he wins a defensive player of the year and a couple rings like Draymond, or if he's ever half the player that Kobe was, and don't ever compare or Julius Randle to Patrick Ewing. That's you show that you're not familiar with Knicks history. There's that. So as far as Van Gundy's comments, we talked about this previously, and it was my contention then, and I believe it again now that Van Gundy's kind of a mouthpiece for Tibbs. The things Tibbs wants to say publicly, Van Gundy's very happy to voice those concerns. Kind of a roundabout way to let Randle know that this is not acceptable. In ways that Tibbs either doesn't feel comfortable or is calculated that he doesn't that it doesn't make sense. The one issue I had with Van Gundy when he says as far as what a coach can do, if the problem's to be corrected, it's going to have to be Julius Randle who wants to get it corrected. I don't disagree with that necessarily. Right. But that being said, sometimes a player or person has to be incentivized change their behavior.
Right.
When my son and my daughter argue over, something at dinner, or they tease one another, they're not going to stop until I say, usually until I say, you guys are going to have to go to bed early if you don't cut it out. If
Yeah.
left to their own devices, they would, they would push and, and nudge each other all day long. Sometimes a person has to be, shown that there are consequences to actions. And at some point you'd feel, I think a lot of fans would feel comfortable if you would prefer that if Tibbs took Randle to task, because we've seen what ignoring it does. It didn't work in year
Yeah.
one. It hasn't worked in year two. So let's try some different options here. Maybe calling him out of the carpet, maybe taking away his playing time, maybe benching him for a quarter or half, whatever the case might be. So that's kind of all that's there. Again, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But he's talked about the things that contribute to winning. Again, the Knicks have a very small margin for error. They don't have Giannis. They don't have Jokic. They don't have Kevin Durant. They have a collection of very good players that complement each other well, a roster that's structured successfully and correctly. When Randle's playing at all NBA level and Brunson's doing his thing and IQ is coming off the bench and contributing, and now you got Josh Hart and Barrett and chipping pieces, then the Knicks can compete with the best teams in the NBA on most nights. Again, but if they don't, then they have the chance to get blown out, and they're not as competitive again because they don't have that superstar to take over games in the fourth quarter and keep them close. So for those reasons, you want Randle to get as close to on the same page as possible. You don't want him to completely, you don't want him to turn the switch off. And part of the reason he's great, part of the reason he's going to make All NBA is because he's a force to be reckoned with when he puts his head down, it gets angry, and sledgehammers people under the basket. You don't want to turn that towards the ref because it's counterproductive. You don't want to turn that on to your teammates or coaching staff because it doesn't usually yield positive results. So again, there's that fine line there. Randle's talked about himself. I don't need him to issue a public apology to IQ, but just do the right thing next time.
Yeah. Well, I will say I think that your point about perhaps JVG speaking to Tibbs, I've been skeptical of it. I'm starting to be more of a believer. Because now it seems like he's fine. JVG seems to find the camera or the microphone when Julius Randle's having issues to speak his mind about it. So that definitely could be the case. I agree. I think what some of the fans are missing when we say, well, what about these other great players and leaders who were not perfect? Michael Jordan's been mentioned. Like the problem that people don't understand is there's a certain level of rope that you get based on what you've accomplished in the league. And one of my favorite quotes about leadership came from Michael Jordan in The Last Dance, when he said, like, you could say I was an a-hole, you could say I was whatever, but the one thing you can never say is that Michael Jordan didn't do something that he's asking you to do. Like, whatever thing I'm going crazy about, whatever, like, I'm doing the same thing. So, like, the problem with Julius when it comes to these outbursts is you see times where he's not giving 100% effort, or you see a player who has had these issues in the past and has not garnered a reputation as a leader, as a champion, as a superstar player, that you don't have the license or the rope to say, okay, I could believe in him that this is the way to be, or I can trust that, okay, maybe he will fly off the handle, but I know in that second half he's going to come out guns blazing, locked in, ready to go. That's the problem. Like, you earn that trust. And I think what the problem with some of the perception around Julius, and this perception that maybe people are being too harsh, is they think he's earned something. And last I checked, this is New York City. You earn your reputation, you earn your name in the playoffs, in the postseason. Do you win playoff games? Do you win playoff series? Do you win championships? That's what we care about. I mean, people mentioning, well, he had 57 points a couple weeks ago. That was a loss. Who cares if he had 57 points in a loss? He lost to one of the worst teams in the league. I don't, and with Jalen Brunson out there, I don't care that you had 57 points. And now if you're hurting the team the next game, you're hurting the team the next game. It doesn't matter. So, and the other thing I can't stand about this commentary with Julie sometimes is it's like, oh, well, you're pushing an agenda or you're a hater. It's like, we got to get out of this thing now where if you're criticizing an athlete, you're pushing an agenda or you're hating. Like, Julius Randle is an important piece to the New York Knicks. Anybody who's rooting for the New York Knicks who is concerned about Julius Randle is because they're concerned about the Knicks. So Julius Randle having these incidents we've seen doesn't do well for them. Like I've seen Draymond Green get thrown out of games, get suspended, and do whatever. But guess what? He's able to bounce back. The team's able to bounce back, and they're able to go out and win championships, win playoff games, win playoff series. They're able to overcome that. And in fact, when they couldn't, he's the one that says it was me being out of control against Cleveland in Game 5 that cost us an NBA championship. And that's the other part of it. Julius has these incidents, and then we can't find him. We got to put an APB out there or put him on a milk cart and say, where is this guy? We don't hear from him for a week. Like, that can't be. You cannot say you're a leader, and then when the stuff gets hot in the kitchen, you're nowhere to be found. So, and I understand that there's frustration, there's anger. You don't want to go out there and say something stupid because you're angry. We get that. You saw RJ do it earlier where he didn't talk to the press after a bad game. We got benched, and that was fine. But the problem with Julius is that it's a pattern. So when you see a pattern happening, it's important for us to address it and say, oh, this is something that's continuing to go on. Like, how can a Knicks be a viable team, a team that now has real expectations, if one of your best players is so unfocused at times where he needs to be laser focused? And that's all we're asking from Julius.
100%. And two things. One, on the fan, hater thing. I'm happy you brought that up too, because in my comments and Twitter mentions people, you don't like Julius. It's clear now that you just don't like. I've never went to dinner with Julius Randle. I don't know if he's a good father. I don't know if he's a good husband. I don't know if he's cool to play pool with. Like I haven't watched movies with him. I don't know Julius Randle. When he does things that don't help the Knicks, I write about it. When he does things that help the Knicks, I write about it. When he's playing well enough that he should force his way onto the NBA team, the All NBA team, I write about it. When he gets 3 technicals in 3 consecutive games and has blow-ups that impact the emotional fabric of the team, I write about it. It has nothing to do with how I feel about the individual personally. I think, like, in the social media realm, people get too confused about whether you like somebody or you dislike somebody. It has nothing to do with that. So that's that point. And yes, the earning the reputation. We know we have 3 years worth of data now. When he's playing well and focused on the right things and smiling and kind of seemingly in a good mental space, the Knicks win. When things are they win big. When things aren't, and he's getting technicals and he's angry and he's pouting and he's ignoring the media, the Knicks tend not to do as well. There's not a 1-to-1 correlation, but there's a pretty good direct correlation between the vibes around the team and motion and Randle individually and the success. So all that's wrapped into it. So we can't ignore it when we see it. It has to be acknowledged, as Van Gundy talked about. The pressure's only going to get ramped up. And again, to your point, this is New York. It's awesome that we have an important game on the 73rd, 74th, whatever it is, game of the season, Wednesday night. The Knicks have played well enough, largely due to Randle's incredible production this season. But let's not fool ourselves. That's to get into the playoffs when the games take up added importance, and that's when you develop a reputation. Randle has had 1 taste of the postseason, and it went awfully, and he did not respond well. Let's see how he does in his second taste. Hopefully, they get there as they should. And the other thing was just quickly about kind of earning the thing, and I hate to sound like an old, I'm in my 40s now. The constant complaining after every call, and it's not just by the good players on the team; it's by every player. And Spencer Dinwiddie, if you watch Nets games, literally.
Jabari Smith last night as a rookie is going after the refs. He got teed up.
19-year-old Jabari Smith. I mean, you see it on the college level. Every call is stunned. I think one of the reasons if I had to vote, I'd vote for Jokic is because he doesn't complain that much on calls. And Luka Doncic. All this stuff trickles down. You mentioned Jabari Smith. The AAU kids see it. The college kids see it. We can talk about it over the summer, but the NBA has to nip this thing in the bud where every player. Listen, it used to be, and I heard NBA radio. I sold Spagnola and Scalabrini talking about this yesterday morning, was Jordan and Pippen and Phil Jackson can complain at the refs. Everybody else shut up. Like
yeah.
BJ Armstrong and even Horace Grant, those guys don't have they can't get away with confronting the ref. If you're one of the best players in the team, one of the best players in the sport, you get a little extra rope and you can make a tantrum and then you get back on defense. But that's something for another day. But yeah, to your point, Randle hasn't earned the ability to curse out teammates and go tantrums and ignore media for days at a time.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, they don't know if like him doing that is going to result in anything good. In fact, it's only resulted in bad things. That's what's so crazy about this conversation is that like it'd be different if I said, "Oh, Randle got thrown out of a game. The next game he had 50." I was like, "All right, there's a clear evidence that like again, like Draymond Green, like you just know that you kind of just have to let that guy loose a little bit. Like I think Curry even lets him go a little too far, but you just know that that's the only way to get the most out of him is to kind of let him kind of go off.
Or you'll see with coaches sometimes they'll get a technical to
ramp on purpose.
With Randle, it works in the opposite. He doesn't get the tech and then cool down. He just escalates and escalates.
Yeah,
and escalates.
Right, because he doesn't have control of his emotions in those times. Or where again there are guys or coaches or Draymond Green said himself when he did that thing against Dylan Brooks. He was like, I get technical fouls when I want to get technical fouls. Like with Randle, you see that there is like a clear, something that snaps in his head.
It's not calculated where he thinks like, he loses it.
Yeah, it's like he loses it and then he stays focused on it and he can't move on from it. And he can't because then the game will end. And how many times you see him be the last guy to leave the court because he's following the refs into the locker room. Like, so look, Randle, I thought last night, better game than we've seen from him. Offensively, I thought he was really good. Didn't do anything rebounding. I didn't think his defense was that great. Nobody's defense was that great in the first half, so I'm not going to necessarily pick on him. This Wednesday game against the Heat will be huge to see kind of where he's at. This is a team that he's had success against this season. Let's see where he's at in this big game. So let's talk about that.